Another year, another Game Awards drama. Or two. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Alanah. I work in the games industry, including being on the Game Awards jury, I think 4 or 5 or 6 separate times. I don't know. Point is, I've been on the official jury and thus am familiar with how voting works for this particular show. Though I should note, I haven't voted in like 5 years now. If you've watched my content for a while, you definitely will have heard me talk about this before, but before we get into the drama this time around, which is Expedition 33 and Dispatch, I'd like to explain a little bit about how voting in the Game Awards actually works for those who don't know. And the short, most of you do already know this to a degree, but maybe don't let it sink in as much as you should. It's not an award show. Genuinely, the name is a lie at this point. It is not an award show. It's about 3 hours of trailers, and to be totally candid, I love that. I do, in fact, enjoy my 3 hours of flashy game reveals on a stage in which Jeff Keighley wears cool sneakers and Chris Judge speaks for 12 minutes.
Joseph, we're excited to have you here tonight.
Well, get me started, Jeff.
Genuinely, I really love the Game Awards. I'm always really excited about it, and I recognize how difficult it is to put together, and I do think that Jeff deserves the credit for that task and for how much of a staple this show has become. I look forward to it every single time. But it is just a bunch of marketing. And as such, I don't take it remotely seriously as an award show. It doesn't take itself seriously as an award show. And I say that as someone who's been nominated for an award and technically won one, though obviously not like by myself, but as part of a team that I worked on. The awards part does matter to dev teams and people who work in the industry. I get that. It is a recognition of their work on a huge stage, and in some cases, these people may only experience this kind of thing once in their entire lives. But because of the way the jury works, it both shouldn't mean that much to you if you don't win, and especially shouldn't mean anything to you if you're just an audience member who is not involved with the creation of these games, nor literally invested in their sales. This video is directed at gamers, not at game devs who have a different perspective, understandably. Let me explain. The Game Awards voting is literally just a bunch of people who never communicate, sending ranked lists to the production company. I feel like jury implies that there is deliberation, but there isn't even a conversation. I've seen people suggest this week, like say there's collusion, as though the jury has a collective agenda. These people do not even talk to each other at any point during this process. They don't even know each other. They sometimes don't even speak the same languages. The process of voting for the Game Awards, for me, has always been looking at the categories and writing the names of 5 or so games in either an Excel spreadsheet, which is what we did while I worked at Funhouse, or a Google form, which is how they did it when I worked at IGN, next to each of those categories in accordance with my personal opinion. Then the other people who work at those same companies with me, who I also didn't ever talk to about this really, do the same thing, and then all of those games are tallied, and the ones who the most people entered get sent off to Jeff Keighley by either Elise Williams at Funhouse or Dan Stapleton at IGN. The Game Awards team then does this, but with every single team who they've asked to participate in the jury, they, I don't know, Excel spreadsheet or something to see which games got the most nominations in each individual category, and the top 4 or 5 or 6, those become the nominees. It's effectively just a giant popularity contest. It isn't some super thoughtful, in-depth process. I can't even guarantee that half of the jury members aren't just like putting these numbers in at the end of a busy workday, considering they don't get paid to be in the jury, and their votes are basically run the same way as an election. Game Awards does not ask for an explanation. In fact, did you know that if enough people wrote in a game that did not even fit in a specific category, because the Game Awards doesn't really define their categories hyper-specifically, it would still be accepted? Like if 75% of the jury in 2025 just happened to write in that they thought Duke Nukem Forever was Game of the Year, Duke Nukem Forever would be nominated as the 2025 Game of the Year, and the jury would be right to do that, of course.
Hell, I'd still hit it.
The categories are not heavily narrowed down, so the members of this jury who do not talk and could have completely different reasons for nominating whatever game in whatever particular category can come up with kind of anything. Comparatively, other juries I've been a part of have been very in-depth. The BAFTAs specifically actively reach out to individuals and ask if they're willing to act as a jury for usually only one individual category. I was on Best Indie Game for the BAFTAs a few years ago. They asked if I would judge Best Indie Game for the BAFTAs. We ended up with a long list of games that we were required to play. Like, it's part of the agreement. If you agree, you are agreeing to play the games. And then you get on a Zoom call or Google Drive, I don't know, like Teams, whatever, with other members of the games industry, largely game developers, though also some games journalists. And you have to debate which is the one that you think is the most deserving. Then after that debate, you write in, considering the arguments other jury members have presented with your pick for winner. You can keep your vote a secret still. The team of people doesn't act like a legal jury where like they collectively have to just put one answer forward. You instead all still get to vote individually. And then from that, the BAFTAs sees what you all submitted, and the winner is picked from that based on the one that received the most votes. Very different to the Game Awards. It's why it's like every year there's drama, and every year I feel like making a video along these lines where I'm like, you have to stop taking this show this seriously. You have to. It really doesn't have a lot of thought put into it. You really want to hear an argued opinion presented by a jury who has definitely played and actually discussed or debated their answers. There are shows for that. You can go and watch those for that particular thing. The Game Awards is clearly something else. You know what else is something else? This cool new wallet. Nailed that segue. Your wallet is probably the oldest tech that you still use. Like, even as your phone and your watch have gotten smarter, your wallet has probably stayed behind. But why? Why, when Extra has the upgrade you've been looking for. Extra has sustainable smart wallets built for the 21st century, combining premium materials, cutting-edge tech, and sleek minimalist designs. First up, meet the Wallet Pro. This thing is so cool. I mean, obviously. Look at it. But beyond the way it looks, it's made from premium vachetta leather and fully recycled aluminium, or aluminum for the Americans among us. It holds 1 to 14 cards plus cash and straight up never gets bulky or bulgy. The wallet is also built with a lifetime warranty, comes in a whole bunch of different colors, and you can customize it with Extra's modular add-on ecosystem. Add cash straps, coin holders, and tracker cards. There's also a metal ejector trigger that you click once and all your cards pop up, so you don't have to fight with card pockets like basically every other wallet that claims to be non-bulky. It rules. Speaking of which, the Finder card. If you're worried about losing your wallet, I'm guilty of this. I lose stuff all the time. I almost missed a flight once because I couldn't find my passport. Well, good news! Extra has Finder cards that you can ring directly from your iPhone up to 300 feet away at 75 decibels, or just track it directly with Apple's Find My network. The battery also lasts 6 months per charge, is water resistant, and is the exact same size as a credit card, so it slides into any wallet, not just the Wallet Pro. So why don't you upgrade your wallet and your life with Extra? Get up to 45% off with my code CHARALANAZARD by going to partner.extra.com/CHARALANAZARD. Now back to the video. So let's chat about two of the sort of more contentious nominees this year, Expedition 33 and Dispatch. Figured I'd talk about Dispatch first because it's the easier of the two to explain. Full disclosure, I play a character named Malevola in this game, and I love her, and I love the game, and I love the team, but that's not what I'm talking about here. Dispatch was nominated for Best Debut Indie Game, but interestingly not Best Indie Game, nor Best Narrative or Art or Game of the Year, which are various categories that people feel it belongs. I swear those people are not just me, okay? People really are saying this. And Dispatch is in a really weird position, which explains how this ended up this way. One sort of rule that does exist for the previously established sort of rule-less Game Awards is that there's a cutoff date. This year it was November 4th. Note here that I have to make while editing. The Game Awards website says that the cutoff date is November 21st, which doesn't make sense considering the nominees went out before November 21st. But also I asked 5 separate people on the jury and they all told me that it was November 4th. So my guess is there's kind of a distinction that it's like the game has to have been out by November 21st, but the jury is told that they need to submit their votes for the nominees by November 4th. Dispatch, of course, is episodic. Episodes 1 to 4 were out by November 4th, but that's it. It is actually possible that some people nominated it for other categories. Again, the Game Awards is pretty ruleless, but I would think that majority of the jury was not comfortable nominating it for things like Game of the Year or Best Narrative without being able to actually finish the game. I would agree with them. That would be a really weird thing to do. On the jury, I would not have been comfortable nominating it. The debut indie, on the other hand, I feel like it makes the most sense. Like, this is likely coming from people just at least wanting to acknowledge the immediately obvious quality of Dispatch without feeling comfortable putting it anywhere else. It's also easy to argue without having finished it that it belongs in this particular category, I think. Like, again, there are no actual rules here. The category is not really defined other than by its title. It's sort of vibes-based. But when you think of debut indie, Dispatch came in on the scene, made as a game by former Telltale staff with some incredible voice acting, myself excluded, obviously. Top-tier animation and immediately very engaging writing. You can't nominate something you haven't finished for Game of the Year. Again, technically you could, but I feel like that would be very weird. But you can nominate it for debut indie pretty easily. Even the first episode is a hell of a debut, so certainly the first 4 are. Hi, editor Alanah here again. So the extra weird part about this is that previously, I would have thought Dispatch would be eligible to be nominated next year, based on that November 4th cutoff date for when people had to submit their nominations. But now that I've seen that the website says November 21st as the cutoff date, we actually discover that Dispatch is kind of in a position where it cannot be nominated for either year. Technically, this is the first time I know of this happening. Dispatch couldn't get nominated for anything this year because naturally people are not comfortable nominating a game they haven't finished for Game of the Year, but it's also not eligible as specified by the website for next year because the game has to have been out by November 21st. I really would have said that I thought that Dispatch would get potentially nominated for a few things next year. Maybe I do go on to talk about that in the video, but now I'm thinking that maybe Dispatch exists in a weird limbo where it can't be nominated in either year because of the way the episodes came out, which is very weird. Also, fucking GTA 6 is out next year, so why are we even bothering to talk about this, really? Unless Rockstar delay it again? Which wouldn't surprise me. And I would defend them in doing so, should they want to, because I would prefer a good game to a game that comes out too soon. And also, my gaming backlog is so long, and I haven't had time to play Hades 2 yet, and I just really like the games industry to take a break for a year, because how am I supposed to play all these video games? Now let's jump into Expedition 33, which is officially the most nominated game in the Game Awards history, and is likely to win more than any other game prior to it, too, in my opinion. People seem to largely accept that this game is very good and deserving of the categories that it is nominated in, aside from one, and we'll get to that. But I do want to note that it's actually unlikely that this nomination wave came from the same people. It's more likely that one outlet, let's say IGN, I have no idea, as an example, nominated Expedition 33 for Best Narrative and Best Music, then GameSpot nominated it for Best Game Direction and Best Art Direction. Then you combine the 100 outlets or whatever, also nominated it for just a couple of categories. This is not accurate, but I'm just saying as an example to illustrate the point. The jury doesn't talk. It's not like there was some wave of agenda to force Expedition 33 into every category. It's likely just that different teams didn't nominate it all 12 times, but enough of them nominated it for enough categories that the combination of all of them together ended with it getting almost every spot. Does that make sense? But here are the contentious ones with Expedition 33. Best Independent Game and Best Indie Debut. The internet sentiment is that considering the size of the team and the budget, Expedition 33 should not be in these particular categories. Again, there are no rules. Jury can vote for it for whatever reason they like. But I do think this also brings up a bit of a messy conversation. What is indie anymore? It used to mean a game that didn't have a publisher. Blueprints, which is my personal game of the year, by the way. Like, I know Expedition 33 is going to win at the Game Awards, and it totally deserves it, but Blueprints is my personal game of the year. Jesus Christ, I love that game. It was published by Raw Fury. It took an incredibly small team, largely one person, Tonda Ross, I think 10 years to make, but because at some point Raw Fury either paid Tonda so he can finish making the game, or it just gave him help actually releasing it into the world, it is not technically indie by old terms. Absalom was published by Dotemu, Ball Pit was by Devolver, Expedition 33 was published by Kepler Interactive. Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silksong are the only games in the independent category that are actually independent in that they were self-published by the developers and are really weird examples to use because they were also able to self-fund by virtue of their insane profits from previous games. Because Hollow Knight individually sold so well, over 15 million copies, Team Cherry does not need a publisher. The sales of Hollow Knight fund Team Cherry, as in pay for their mortgages, if they even need to have them at this point, and their clothes and their food and their bills. The exact same applies to Supergiant. Their previous games are able to pay their employees rent while they work on the next thing. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is an indie game. Think about that. Baldur's Gate 3, which is estimated to have cost over $100 million, does not have a publisher. Larian is not owned by a publisher. The team at Larian was over 400 people, with, when you include outsourced partners and contractors, which we should, become over 2,000. But it's an indie game. Dispatch is also self-published, but when you consider the entire animation studio that worked on this game from Thailand and other outsourced partners, it probably, and I do not know, to be clear, cost several $1 million to make per episode. I charge them literal minimum wage for my part, to be clear, so you can't blame me, okay? Literal minimum wage. And I would do it again. Now, I don't have a solution to this problem, with the problem being, what is an indie game anymore? How do we qualify what an indie game is? I've considered that the term should maybe instead be applied to team size. Like, maybe something is indie if it was made by under 30 people, including outsources. Again, it's annoying me actively that the industry keeps, like, forgetting that outsource people exist. Like, there's just... This is like a side tangent for sure. But when someone comes out and says, this game was made by only 30 people, you're just straight up dismissing all of the labor of the people who are usually very underpaid and often come from Asian countries, who do just as much work on those games because they aren't employees of the studio. I think it's very unfair and kind of gross. Sorry, point being, this would rule out Dispatch and Expedition 33, who may have internally had around 30 people, but had far more outsourced people who worked on both of their games, largely from Thailand and Korea, respectively. This would also classify Pentiment, which is a game made by a team of 13 people at Obsidian, as an indie game. That project very much feels that way and came from a very specific vision from Josh Sawyer, rather than being led by goddamn juggernaut-ass Microsoft. But same token, it's owned by juggernaut-ass Microsoft. Well, we maybe go by budget, but then how do you qualify what the budget was for Hollow Knight Silksong? Budgets for video games are literally just salaries. Like, a budget for a game is literally just how much did it cost to pay each individual developer their annual salary for the duration of the development of the game. That's where video game budgets come from. Did Team Cherry give themselves salaries for Silksong, or did they just continue profiting off of Hollow Knight's tremendous success and took the earnings straight from Steam into their bank accounts and made Silksong without any official salary, but sort of as like a hobby while that other thing they made continued making money? Like, genuinely, how do you qualify how much it costs to make Silksong? Because they're earning millions of dollars from Hollow Knight. You could argue that that is their salaries, and thus Silksong costed $15 million. Or it costed $0. I genuinely don't know. I don't know the solution to this odd problem in general. Like, you gotta tell, it keeps me up at night. What is it? What is an indie game? If you have any suggestions for what indie should mean in 2025, let me know. Maybe we can figure out some new definition together that makes it so that we can separate games like Balatro and games like Baldur's Gate 3, considering they're just like vastly different development circumstances and scales. I don't know. But for now, indie technically means a video game that's made without the support of a publisher, which actually means most of the games in the indie category are not, in fact, indie. Only Hades 2 and Silksong qualify. There's also, like, people consider it like it's indie if it has a small scale publisher. What does that mean? Like, do we need to then see the earnings of every single publisher in order to qualify if something's indie or not? Like, I don't know. I feel like I think I like the team size option. I'm really not confident, but the team size option makes things feel more indie because there is less meddling. You know what I mean? I'm currently working on a game with 3 other people. Wishlist layers deep on Steam. We are actively talking to publishers because we need to be able to pay our bills while making the game, and haven't been able to work on it full time because none of us can afford to do that without some level of money. There's only 3 of us. There will only be 3 of us throughout the duration of the development of Layers Deep. Do we stop being indie as soon as we accept money from a publisher? I don't know. You may have even seen that the game director for Megabonk asked not to be nominated in the Best Indie Debut category because they had made other games before. They felt it didn't feel right to be nominated for Best Debut Game. They technically do deserve to be there since it's their first game being made by them under the studio name Vedanad, but the developer themselves had made games before. And I see their concern. Like, couldn't you just rename your indie studio every year or every time you release a new game and thus end up being eligible for this award again and again and again? Like, basically, you get the idea. Stop worrying so much about the Game Awards and their categories and what gets nominated. The minute that you poke like any holes, the whole thing kind of falls apart. I personally watch the DICE Awards and the GDC Awards specifically for the awards parts, and the Game Awards for the shiny trailers. We should not be taking the Game Awards this seriously. It really doesn't matter. People always get so upset about who did or did not win Game of the Year any year. That's not the point of the show. It's really not. And again, I do get it if you're a game developer. Obviously, again, as someone who has been nominated for work that I directly have done, that's what it was for God of War Ragnarok. I was super proud when we won that award. But if we hadn't, I'd be like, if Dispatch wins for Best Debut Indie this year, obviously, I will be so unbelievably proud of this team, and I'm still so proud to have anything to do with this game anyway, like, irrelevant of if it wins an award. But I would also, be like, well, yeah, well, it's a weird category, and the dates are weird, and, very cool to see people's hard work represented on a stage like this. These people do work really hard, and having worked on something that's gotten to the point where it has this much recognition is huge and very difficult. There are so many games releasing, not even every year anymore, but every day. But I also gamers, you have no reason to care. Don't care. Whatever is your game of the year is your game of the year, and the Game Awards cannot take that away from you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It's the voting has no meaning.